Welcome to this episode of Let's Be Civil. Today's guest on Let's Be Civil is Dr. Rich Szecsy. Dr. Szecsy is Chief Operations Officer with Charley's Concrete in Fort Worth, Texas. Previously, he was President of the Texas Aggregate and Concrete Association and Vice President at Lattimore Materials. Currently, he's Vice-Chair of ASTM Committee C09 on Concrete and Concrete Aggregates, and he's also an avid cyclist. All right, welcome everybody to another podcast of Let's Be Civil. And today I've got another one of my good friends, Rich Szecsy, who is on the job, actually in his office, unlike a lot of the guests I've had so far have been working from home. And Rich tells me that not only is he on the job, but he's on the job at a level that they may break some company records for work. So the world has not completely stopped in all of this. I will say this, Rich, I think you would agree, because I want to touch on something that you were doing before you have the job that you have now, but civil engineering does not have these huge spikes and drops and things like that in the work that we do. Not that it doesn't go up and down, but when there's a problem in the world, you don't see civil engineering projects come to a halt. Our projects are designed and in the pipeline for a long time, and you just can't put the brakes on. There's a lot of momentum. So I would expect some of what you guys have been doing is that sort of, it's work that's been planned for a while.
Yeah, and John, thanks for having me today.
Sure.
It's really weird. I've always told people there's three things I'm 100% certain of: death, taxes, and concrete consumption tracks in a linear fashion with population. I've got to come up with a cooler term like concretion or something. But then everybody would ask, by the way. Everybody would then ask me what that means.
Right.
But the point is goes directly to what you were saying, which is because our population where we work in Texas and North Texas or really anywhere, as that population grows, the demand for these civil engineering structures, products, continues to grow, and we have to supply them.
Right.
The population growth doesn't know that there's a pandemic.
Right.
The population growth doesn't know that there might be a slowdown in the economy. All it knows is it's growing and it needs to consume.
Right.
And so you're 100% right. I had somebody ask me how we're doing economically at the beginning of this. And I said, if all construction, and so today's, Monday, April 20th of 2020, if you would have asked me the same question, say 20 days ago on the 1st, I would have told you that if all new construction had stopped, I'm talking new construction, new contracts had stopped on the 1st of April, I would have had enough work in progress under contract to take me through the end of May.
Right.
We're doing 70 hours a week right now with all of our drivers. We're hitting maximum hourly amounts per day, maximum weekly. We are just hammered down.
Right. Well, and this is actually something that I make a point of when I talk to parents or prospective students, that, I always say that if the economy goes like this, civil engineering goes like this. It's not that it's not going to go and have its ups and downs, but they're not going to be radical. You're going to keep moving along.
Well, and this probably goes to some of the foundational courses that you've got there, which is roads, water,
right,
housing. All of these things are infrastructure,
yep,
are all civil. You've
yep,
got to have them no matter what's going on in the world.
Yep. So I know go ahead.
No, I was going to, and so we're building that right now. I mean, I've got new work, I've got rework. It's just, I don't see any sign on the horizon of it slowing down outside of a global, and I mean global recession. But the pandemic isn't bothering us. And here's the other one thing too, I've been telling a lot of people is construction, our side of the civil, kind of area, we're social distance by nature.
Mm-hmm.
We're not in cubicles.
Mm-hmm.
We're not,
Mm-hmm.
shoulder to shoulder
Right.
out there. It's, we can construct things and be socially distanced.
Yep.
So
Good
when
point.
somebody said, "Oh, you got to stay 6 feet apart," no problem.
Right. Because I'm telling you to go over there and do something over there anyway. You know,
Right.
I don't need you to make sure you're 6 feet away from me when you do it. You're going to be 20 feet away from me when you do it.
Well, and then you couple that with the simple fact that when we talk about PPE, personal protective equipment, we're already in long sleeves, long pants. We've already got goggles on or safety glasses. We've got hard hats. And in most cases, just because of dust or other things, we've got face coverings on.
Yeah.
So we were already set
there
for this. Yeah.
Yep. So you tipped your camera up. So tip it back down for a moment. All right, that's good.
Yeah.
So you got to help me, so I know the answer, but tell us about the fact that you've got the nickname of Doc on your shirt there. So
Sure. You can't, as you know, you can't pick your own nickname.
Yeah.
And so my background, but a lot of the people listening may not.
Right.
I'm a licensed professional engineer in Texas, including 6 other states. But I also have the academic credentials of an undergrad, master's, and PhD. And so, as you know, that's a doctorate. But about 20 years ago, they were demolishing a building in Dallas, and somebody said, "Hey, well, if you're going to demolish a building, you've got to go see Dr. Concrete." And that was my nickname because as a young kid coming out of college, going directly into the industry. And so it stuck ever since then. I was Dr. Concrete, and everybody passed it around, the contractors, the local guys. So the next thing you know, my nickname is Doc, and everybody knew me that way in the market. So when they gave me the shirt at this company, they were like, "Well, what name do you want to put on that?" Somebody said, "Oh, you got to call him Doc." So it's stuck ever since. And like I said, can't pick your own nickname.
So you were Dr. Concrete before you were actually Dr. Concrete.
Right? I was, yeah.
Right. And so you had to catch up to your nickname.
Yeah, and I think it actually exists on YouTube somewhere, Popular Mechanics for Kids. I was Dr. Concrete on that TV show.
That's funny. So how does a PhD sort of evolve to working at a ready-mix plant?
Well, so what happened was when I came out of school, out of the University of Illinois with a PhD in civil engineering.
All 3 degrees from the same school, right?
No. Undergrad and master's from Texas A&M.
Oh, okay.
And then I went to the University of Illinois for my PhD.
So I'm going to have to end this. Okay, so I'm going to have to end this podcast now. Sorry. There are no A&M people allowed on.
But I went straight through for 9.5 years.
Yeah.
And one of my friends that I met undergrad was a fraternity brother. We became friends. When I graduated, he says, "Hey, now that you're done with your PhD and you can't get another degree, why don't you come to work at this ready-mix company? We're growing, we're global, and we'd love to have you." And whether by luck, design, or just sheer stupidity, I decided, hey, that'd be a great career opportunity. So I went to work for a ready-mix company right out of my PhD. They were a global company. They no longer exist. They've been bought and sold. But I started right out of school in the ready-mix industry and then wound up traveling the world with them, making concrete on 4 different continents.
For what period of time? For how many years did you do?
I did that for 2.5 years.
Wow, that's a lot of stuff for 2.5 years.
Yeah, they were real aggressive. And then they were sold to another company, Hansen, globally. And so they cut our American division. And then I wound up at a regional ready-mix company here in North Texas. And I was with them for 8 years. So I had about 10, 11 years of ready-mix experience before the 2010 recession hit. And that's when I had a little bit of a change in career.
Right. Well, but this is part of the interesting thing that I wanted to talk with you about, because you went from working in the industry to representing the industry.
Yeah.
I mean, you went to the almost, if you want to say the 180 degrees. You're still in the same area, but doing a completely different thing for the industry.
Yeah, so it was a real interesting transition, and it didn't have anything to do with the reason I thought was, so during the recession, 2010, that summer, I was the youngest vice president on our board of directors, and that was the summer I was provided the opportunity to succeed elsewhere, otherwise known as getting fired.
Right.
Because I was the youngest guy, and they figured I would be the easiest one to find a new job. So I took the summer off. But the interesting thing about that was, if you remember back in 2009, there was an interesting tragedy that occurred in Tennessee. A large pond that held fly ash in it, and it was waste product. That dam broke and it flooded a town. The EPA said, we're now going to think about classifying fly ash as a hazardous waste. So they were holding these hearings. And so here I am sitting here with my big PhD credentials, licensed professional engineer, and the State Trade Association was going to go and give testimony in front of the EPA. And they said, we need you as a fellow member of the industry, as an engineer, as a scientist, as a civil engineer, to come give some testimony. And I said, okay, I can do that. I've got the time, because I was gainfully unemployed.
Right.
So I go down there and I stood in front of the EPA, gave some testimony, and I didn't have a dog in the fight. I just said, look, I think you're wrong, and here's why. Well, afterwards, they came to me and they said, hey, you're doing such a great job there. We'd like you to interview for the presidency job of the Texas Aggregate and Concrete Association, which is a state trade association, but the largest in the U.S. of its kind. It represented about $8.5 billion worth of aggregates, concrete, cement in the state. And I said, no, I'd really like to stay in the industry and those kind of things. Then they gave me the second one. They're like, no, son, we'd really like you to interview for this. And then finally, the chairman, who's about 65 years old, gave me that grandfather approach, put the arm around your shoulder, and then gave you that squeeze and said, son, we'd really like you to interview for this job. Yes, sir, I think I will.
Right.
So I did. Everybody had me as a temporary, hey, we just need you to help us ride out this recession thing. Just a couple of years. You're talented. You're going to go somewhere else. Just stay here for a couple of years and we'll be fine. 7.5 years later.
Right.
So I wound up running Taka all the way from the recession all the way through the recovery, and grew them to a pretty significant organization on a national basis.
So I have to tell a story, and then I got a follow-up question for you on this, but because you're talking about job change stuff, and I don't think that this is, I've talked about this with other people, but I don't think it's been officially captured in the podcast. So now it will be, and it's appropriate. I've had multiple jobs that
Sure.
You're aware of, and the one prior to being here in Texas is that I was at Valparaiso University for 4 years, and being a civil faculty member. And the very first day that I sat down in my office, what was it, 2009 or something like that, fall 2009, somewhere around there. And in honest truth, my very first day, and my phone rings, which shocked me because nobody calls me, and it was my first day. And I pick up the phone, and my good friend Rich is on the other end of the phone, asking me to come to Texas to take a job at Texas State. And I'm like, Rich, I'm sitting here on literally my first day on the job, and you're calling to see if I'll come down. And it took Rich 4 times because things happened in I'm trying to fill this position. But that fourth one, he put that that grandfatherly arm around my
Little
shoulder
squeeze.
and said, come down here, which I did. So like what you said, it was supposed to be 5 years in that position, and it ended up being really a year, because in the following year, found out about civil engineering, kind of getting underway, and that second year was a lot of transition more than it was.
Yeah.
Was doing that first job. But so it's now official. It's in the record. I like your grandfatherly arm around the shoulder kind of a thing, because I don't know if you remember, but you got a hold of me every year for 4 years saying, hey, this job's still open. Are you interested? And I think I said each time I'd be interested, but I haven't been here very long. That was the biggest thing for me. Is like, I can't walk away after, stepping foot on campus for one day. But the timing ended up working out well when it did, and I think it's continued to work out well since then too. So that's kind of funny. So, but I wanted to talk to you about actually, making the decision to go back,
Sure.
into the commercial sector of things, because now, unless you tell me something otherwise, this was much more of a personal decision than somebody coming in and putting their arm around you and saying, we need some help. Is that correct?
Yeah. I was perfectly content running what I was running. I think there was, maybe some opportunities to even go run an association at a national level. And associations are great, and they serve a huge purpose, and they have a big role in our industry. But I was giving a speech at one of the meetings, and one of the presidents and owners of a ready-mix company was there. And, he had gotten to a crossroads of his company and said, we're going to need something different if we're going to continue to grow. And came up to me afterwards, and he says, hey, you're the guy I want to run my company. I need you to be the president, and those kind of things. And I was like, yeah, I hear you. That's so great. Please have a drink at the bar and put it on my tab.
Right.
And about 3 weeks later, I followed up with him, and I said, I probably should look into that. And he was serious, and I wasn't really looking, but all of a sudden it was the perfect fit for us. I've loved the business. I've always loved the operating side of it. It's just in your blood. It's in my blood,
right,
to be a concrete producer, to build things.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with the association. Loved it. Taught me a tremendous amount about politics and strategy, and those kind of things that have helped on the commercial side. No question about it. But I'm an engineer. I'm the funny thing is I'm going to say accused, but it's really more of a claim of being what's called a dirt shirt engineer. And that's, I've got cuts on my hand. I've got calluses. I've got dirt on my shirt.
Right.
Because that's where I want to be.
Right.
Is solving those problems in the field. Like, there's a reason I'm not wearing the suit and tie today.
Right.
I was out at a plant working on an inventory control problem out there with the guys at the plant with our customers, and lo and behold, we get it solved. And the next thing you know, I'm on a podcast with you talking about the industry. So to me, that's just who I am. And it was inevitable that I was going to come back to the industry on that side of it.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about your time at the association, because so I've had a conversation. I've done a podcast with Tom Adams from American Coal Ash, and actually it's if people happen to look at yours sort of back to back, he doesn't talk about that failure, but he talks about the ash ponds and that there can be failures. And so it'd be nice, for somebody to kind of, listen to these back to back, and they might hear some different things or some unique perspective on things. So what's the challenge of being what was the biggest challenge you faced being in charge of an association?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge was two things. Is one, you still have customers, but their problems are different. Whereas right now on the commercial side of it, I have somebody that wants to buy a product They place a value on that, and the product either works or it doesn't. If it doesn't work, they let me know. If it does work, we move on to the next sale. In an association, your customers are also what you would also, some people would call members. Well, their problems are totally different. And then the other challenge with that is, if I buy a truck right now, I can tell you what the ROI, rate of return, on that investment is. I know what my payables are. I know what my profits are, those things.
Mm-hmm.
How do you have that same conversation with somebody who you say, hey, I just need you to pay me $25,000 a year to be a member of this association? And they say, and now I'm in that exact position because I pay those dues.
Right.
What's the return on investment for that money that I give?
Right.
And when you're running that association, you have to have an answer of what's the return on investment there. And then the other thing is, to answer that question is the second part, which is understanding the impact that politics and regulatory environments have on our business. And there is no area in civil engineering that escapes that.
Mm-hmm,
None.
mm-hmm,
I don't care what your discipline is: infrastructure, materials, environmental, structures, geotech, any of the divisions you want to are all have some governance from a regulatory environment, a regulatory body, something.
mm-hmm.
And in other states, those things may be aligned, meaning the EPA issues something down and everybody defaults. In a state like Texas, we have city, county, state, and federal regulatory bodies that all cover things we do. That's one of the big things I learned from running a state trade association was, wow, these little tiny things that you don't think about, or, hey, I'm running a business right now. Somebody else is handling that. Who's handling that? Because that decision can now affect what I do. And I'll give you a great example of that. I run a ready-mix plant across the street. It's permitted by a state agency, the TCEQ. The federal government has no jurisdiction. But the local city in which I want to deliver concrete to sets an operating hours for construction that says I can't deliver concrete before 7 a.m. or after 7 p.m. So now I have to stick. So I may have, at the beginning of this, we talked about how much work is there and how busy I am. I'm trying to shove 5 pounds of dirt in a 4-pound hole because I only have 12 hours to construct things.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But the city next to it may not have those restrictions.
Right.
And so, I mean, just all of these things that I never fully understood the importance of that until I ran that trade association.
Well, let me shift gears here a little bit, but the timing here I think is pretty good, because from other stuff that we're involved in, and I'll mention in a second. We were around when there was some letters and stuff coming to ASTM about fly ash, and and about doing this, calling it a hazardous material. I forget when that was coming. Because it wasn't that long ago that ASTM got involved, and so you and I are members of ASTM. I would say that we're not just active members of ASTM. I'd say that we're, you may want to consider that another career in some respects, unpaid,
Yes.
an unpaid career. But it does have the element in ASTM of some, political issues. It is a specifying, it's a document creating organization for people that don't know, what ASTM is or what they do. But there's also this side of civil engineering that we get involved in, that there is no pay, that we are helping to make decisions about how construction's going to operate. For people, maybe not just in the U.S., but it might be, internationally.
Yeah.
And sometimes there are political things that seep into the process, like this issue with fly ash. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the what I like to call the third tenet of civil engineering is we always talk about the first two, public health and safety, right? When you talk about the obligation of an engineer, right? It's public health, safety, and welfare. We never mention that what that welfare means, but I think your point hits right to the core of that. If we're trying to help with the public welfare, what does that really mean? Is that everything from economic, recovery to regulatory control to our volunteer time as experts, as licensed professionals to affect that public welfare?
Right.
And our participation at ASTM, ACI, any of these other volunteer, voluntold organizations, I think falls right into that aspect of being a professional civil engineer. Is you have an obligation.
Yeah.
It's kind of like go ahead.
No, you go.
I was going to say, I always talk about building a hospital or a water system. Hey, that's public health. That's public safety. Well, to me, the public welfare side of that same construction project is doing it economically efficient. What is the least amount of money spent to do that? Because that's protecting the public welfare in addition to its health and safety. So I think you're spot on. And the other thing I also want to mention, you dropped Tom Adams' name on there running the other trade association. And then you and I have a connection through ASTM. That's the other big part about this is that there is a community of connection between your background is completely different than mine, it's completely different than Tom's, but we are connected because of that professional welfare side of our business more than anything else.
Yep. I wouldn't know you if it weren't for those things, right? I mean, I'm not going to cross paths with you at Charley's Concrete. It'd be by accident or,
But think of the expertise. Now, if I'm working commercially, I know other engineers and they're good and that we work together contractually. But the expertise level that we are exposed to through this public welfare connectivity is unparalleled. Your ability to call or reach out to a Tom Adams, a Colin Lobo, and all these guys that are just massive thinkers within our industry, wasn't because of a commercial connection.
Exactly right.
And so I don't know how you get that across, but I just the facts are, it's that prima facie case. It's self-evident.
So one of the things I think is interesting, and we're getting close to our time, is that at ASTM, there is a document that now is much closer to your heart than it would have been maybe before. Not that it was not, but there is a document, and ASTM has this way of labeling things, and so people may not understand it. But there's a document C940 or a committee, I should say. That is, but there is a standard within there. And I forget now what the standard number is for
ASTM C94.
C94, and it's all about producing concrete, ready-mix concrete. I mean, and all of the stuff. And how long has it been going through a transformation?
Probably because standards and regulations, particularly ASTM, are governed or can be changed based as technology changes. And so the things you are teaching your students today, this semester, next semester, will have an impact on how those standards are written. So your point about transformation is, when you say how long has it been transforming, I was like, the day after it got printed the first time.
The first time, right. But it's been going through a more substantive one
in the last 10 years.
And I mean, there's a ballot item for that standard, I think every cycle. But the point I was going to make about it is, and this is something that the general public probably wouldn't have any clue, is the committees have to have balanced representation. They have to be purposefully diverse so that no sector of the industry controls what goes on within the committee, which means they don't control this document. And so there's a lot of, it may not be truly political, but there is a lot of difference of opinion that has to be resolved. And the interesting thing for us in ASTM is we have no choice but to resolve it. If we cannot resolve the differences, then this thing just goes away.
Yeah, and then the change doesn't happen. But you made a very subtle point earlier, and I think it plays right back into this, which is when you said there's a balance. Just this is a prime example of you and I doing this podcast via Zoom, is that document that you talked about is also international. It is used globally.
Yep.
So what thing that I might want to say is a change that needs to be made because it affects my market or there's a technology that I have, you now have to think, well, how does that affect the global environment in which that document is used? To where the subtle issue to the reason I say, no, I can't do that, or it's not, it'll affect me negatively in my one thing.
Mm-hmm.
The other 99.9% of the world has said, it's not a big deal to us, go on.
Yep.
So, I mean.
And what's interesting is they have to speak up. They have to come to the table and make the point of, because if they don't, you're going to make your point that it matters or doesn't matter to you. So if you're not actively involved, things can, become problematic for you wherever you might be in the world.
Well, non-response constitutes acceptance.
Yeah. Well, and it also usually constitutes me changing my stance and becoming involved as opposed to being on the sideline, as I begin to realize I got to be involved to help form the next edition or version of the document.
And the interesting thing is that for you and I, generationally, we actually can remember when things were done on paper.
Mm-hmm.
When we didn't have this capability to go back and forth between screens. It was stamps, mail, fill out this form, handwrite.
You get that,
those kind of things.
You get this thing in the mail that'd be that thick.
Now it is too easy to participate, or how about let me phrase that a different way. It's too easy for you not to participate, to not be heard.
Right.
Which also means your arguments have to be much better structured. And much more factually and scientifically based.
Yeah, you actually, you do learn something that I would sort of do parallel to technical writing and technical presentations. That skill set develops when you're involved in an organization like ASTM. Well, sir, our time is winding here, so I'm going to thank you for joining me on the Let's Be Civil podcast. What I do need to do is get back in touch with you somewhere down the road and have you tell us about, maybe we can give you a body cam and you can walk out into the plant and point to some things, and we can kind of capture, what it's like to actually work at Charley's Concrete.
I'd love to do that. And then more importantly, link it back to a decision that somebody makes on a design specification and say, here's what it looks like right now at the end of the shoot. Your design spec shows up this way.
Right. Yep. No, I think that'd be cool to be able to do that, especially now that I can't come and see you, because otherwise we'd be doing this in your office and not like this, and I'd probably be there for a while. So, but appreciate your time very much. I actually jotted a few notes along the way of some things you helped me to remember, to think about, and to talk with other people about. So I appreciate the unwitting advice you were giving me today. So
you bet, John. Anytime. Glad to help.
Good talking to you. Take it easy, sir. See you.
All right.
Bye.